So I'm not really one for predicting things in games. That being said, I do love talking about marine animals, and I love talking about Splatoon. So let's make an exception this time, and this video is going to be about sea creatures that I would love to see in Splatoon 3. There are literally hundreds of thousands of marine species in our oceans, and they're all amazing, and I would love to see any of them featured in Splatoon. I know I'm gonna love whatever new characters we do get in Splatoon 3, so this video is 100% just for fun, just to talk about some cool animals. And there are some little hints here and there that are informed by the trailers that we've seen so far. So far we've seen 2 trailers, but some of my choices are just animals that I like. So let's get into it. Let's start with the Yeti Crab. I mean, come on you guys, do you see this crab? Do you see his long, hairy claws? He's amazing! We know that we're getting hairy Octarians in Splatoon 3, so why not a hairy crab that exists in real life? I mean, okay, obviously it's not hair in the technical sense. These are still crabs we're talking about. They're more like bristles. They're called setae, I believe, setae, something like that. Basically a different composition than hair, but very similar. And I think this is a really good candidate to be featured in Splatoon 3 because we had a new stage announced called Scorch Gorge. In the background of Scorch Gorge, you can actually see the remnants of hydrothermal vents. Hydrothermal vents are like these underwater hot springs where this super hot water gushes out of the sea floor, attracting a lot of critters along the way because it's a nice warm place to live when the surrounding water is often very cold. And this environment is exactly where Yeti crabs live. In fact, the reason that these crabs are so hairy is because they like to farm food in their hairs by collecting bacteria over that hot stream of water. It's an adaptation to the vent environment. Obviously, in Splatoon 3, these are no longer underwater and there's no signs of life nearby. But I could still see them adding some characters that are inspired by the creatures that used to live in those vents that maybe evolved for these harsher conditions. Yeti crabs were first discovered in 2005 at the Pacific Antarctic Ridge, kind of near Easter Island, which is interesting. I just think they'd make a really cool Splatoon character. Another creature found at hydrothermal vents that I think would be pretty cool to see in the Splatoon universe is the Vulcan Octopus. Doesn't it look like a cute little ghosty? Kind of reminds me of those lollipops with a napkin over it that's supposed to look like a little ghosty. Or just like someone with a sheet over their head, like those Jelonzos in the plaza. They're not Jelonzos, they're jellies, right? They're not all Jelonzos. I mean, they could be. They could all be Jelonzo clones. Do we know this for sure? All I'm saying is, wouldn't it be cool to see an Octarian or an Octoling themed on this cool octopus? It's almost completely colorless and kind of translucent, which gives it that cool ghosty character. That being said, it probably wouldn't be very good at turf war because it doesn't have an ink sac. It also can't change color like some other octopuses can, so it'd kind of be stuck on Team Chicken with no ink. But there's a reason that it doesn't have that ink sac or color changing ability, and that's because it lives at the bottom of the ocean. They don't really need these colorful gimmicks like distracting enemies or hiding from enemies because it's too dark to see anything anyway, so it'd just be a waste of their energy. But come on, we can lend him an ink tank and a splatter shot and welcome him to the game. I think it would be really cool in general to have more variations on the known squid and octopus related characters based on real world species. That would just be amazing in general, and I'd love to see it. Going along with the theme of hydrothermal vent creatures, this is a sea dandelion. And look at those creepy tentacles that are all kind of moving independently of one another. Isn't it so weird? I don't know, I think it's kind of creepy, but also fascinating. This is a type of siphonophore, which are basically these marine creatures that are a whole colony of animals that act together as a unit. We had one of them on the Deep Sea Metro. I've seen it compared to an ant colony where like all the ants are individuals but they work together. The same is true of siphonophores, but they all kind of maintain this singular body, which is super weird, you know? These things are not exclusive to hydrothermal vents, but they are likely to appear once the vent has become inactive or basically died. The dandelions eat a lot of dead stuff, so they tend to show up when the party's over. And the vents at Scorch Gorge sure are dead. And one more creature from hydrothermal vents Can't mention vents without mentioning giant tubeworms, because there sure are giant tubeworms everywhere and it's super creepy. These things grow up to 2 meters long and they can tolerate ridiculously toxic conditions. Often the hydrothermal vents have a bunch of harsh chemicals coming out of that stream of water, but these things just don't even care. They're fine with it. It of course helps that they have kind of a protective outer shell that's shielding them from some of these chemicals. But overall, this would be a very strange thing to see as a Splatoon character, but after the Deep Sea Metro, I feel like anything's possible, so I thought I'd throw it in the list. Okay, so moving on from vents, I would love to see a Nautilus in the Splatoon universe. There is a Nautilus band member already in Ink Theory, which is awesome, but I would love to see it in the main game as well. Nautilus is a cephalopod, just like octopuses and squids, but it has a shell, and it's the last living cephalopod to have a shell. There's this shell sign over on the left side of the Splatoon 3 trailer that kind of gives me hope. I've seen another video mention that this might be the sign for the new hat shop. It kind of looks like a hat with that line at the bottom, and there's hats on the balcony nearby, so I could definitely see this being a possibility. And maybe the sign has something to do with the new hat shop owner. Kind of like the Ammonites sign has a horseshoe crab on it, representing Sheldon. It's all just speculation, but let's say that this sign does have something to do with the shop owner. If that's the case, it honestly looks more like an ammonite than a nautilus, or it could be some kind of snail shell. An ammonite's an extinct shelled cephalopod that's often found as a fossil, but obviously we already have a shop called Ammonites, so it'd be a little weird if there was another shop that was ammonite themed. That being said, Sheldon's shop has nothing to do with ammonites, and it's not called that in Japanese. So maybe it's something where the localization team has a bit of an awkward situation on their hands, but also Splatoon doesn't usually feature extinct creatures as characters. Could be an ammonite, maybe not. It could also be a snail. I mean, there are tons of snails that have spiral shells, and I don't know enough about snails to be able to go into a specific one that I would like to see, but if it's a snail character, I'd love to learn more about that character and whatever species it is. I'm just gonna wait and see if this sign even has anything to do with a new character, and if so, maybe it's Nautilus. Bringing it back to crabs, because I often do, because I have a fondness for crabs, what can I say? This is called the Pom Pom Crab, and I think this would just make such a cool character. They're literally these crabs that will just pick up sea anemones and carry them around at all times to have these epic stinging claws. I mean, how cool is that? It's exactly the kind of weird creature that would fit right in Splatoon. Splatoon's already showcased some really cool symbiotic relationships with Flo and Annie having those little critter companions, so this would be another really interesting one to see. Okay, so we've got jellies in the game. What about comb jellies? Look at these things. They've got these cool rainbow party lights going on. Don't they almost look like LEDs? Like they look electric? And this isn't even bioluminescence. It's just like a sort of a prism, like it's scattering light as it moves. Wouldn't these things be so cool to see alongside all the jellies partying during Splatfest? I think so. I was just about to post this video and I realized that the jellies in Splatoon 2 already have those reflective rows on their heads. And it's especially clear with Gelonzo, if you look at Gelfonso compared to Gelonzo, you can see that Gelfonso has these rainbowy lines on him. They're a little less rainbowy than some of the real comb jellies, but I think that the Splatoon 2 jellies were already inspired by comb jellies, so those are already in the franchise, I guess. I totally overlooked this during my shopkeepers video, but what can you do? On to the next one. Next, I think Splatoon could use some stars. And I don't say sea stars or starfish because that's actually only a subset of the star-related creatures in the ocean. There's also brittle stars and feather stars. Any of these would be super cool to see in the game. A sea star would be cool as long as it was done well. I mean, I can see why maybe we wouldn't want a Patrick or a Peach walking around the plaza, but a cool sea star character I'm absolutely here for. That sounds awesome. But I do also want to talk about the lesser known stars in the ocean. Brittle stars are basically like sea stars, but weirder, creepier, I think a little cooler. They've got these long, skinny arms. They're often found coiled around corals or sponges in the deep ocean. And I don't know, I just think it would lend itself to a lot of cool character design possibilities. Maybe something edgy like Spike, who's also kind of related to sea stars. Sea urchins, sea stars, brittle stars, feather stars, these are all in the same group, overall group of animals. And feather stars are these really gorgeous, flowy, feathery looking relatives to the sea star. They look kind of like really pretty plants, but then they start moving and it's kind of unsettling. And there's so many different kinds in all sorts of different beautiful colors, so I think there's a lot to choose from when it comes to character design. These are also called sea lilies, by the way, or crinoids, so if you heard any of those, it's all the same type of creature. And finally, I can't not mention marine mammals. It's Return of the Mammalians, you guys! Marine mammals are noticeably absent from Splatoon, and apparently on purpose. The official Squid Research Lab stuff says that Judd and Little Judd are the only two known mammals in the Splatoon universe. The new single-player mode is called Return of the Mammalians, so the question is, are they really returning? Or is it just some villainous plot to make everything furry? If mammals are returning, wouldn't that be the perfect time to bring in marine mammals? Can you just imagine a whale character or a seal or a manatee? They did recently add a manatee to Animal Crossing. Nogami, are you hinting at something? Maybe a dolphin, that could be fun. So obviously that's a very broad category. I don't have a specific species I'd love to see, but of course marine mammals would be really, really cool. Like I said, this is all just for fun. I know I'm going to love whatever characters do end up appearing in Splatoon 3. I have nothing but appreciation for all that Splatoon has offered in terms of showcasing ocean creatures, obscure ocean creatures for everyone to enjoy. I think that's so cool. Do you have any ideas for ocean animals that you'd love to see in Splatoon? Do you have a favorite marine animal in general? Please let me know in the comments below and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already to see more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.